I've been feeling like doing some more of those game animation breakdowns again, so I asked my patrons for some suggestions, and they came back with some real good ones. Welcome to New Frame Plus, let's look at some animation. Who's first? You got it. Run cycles tend to be one of the more important animations on any given game character because you're probably going to be seeing that animation a lot. It is often the foundation of your player character's moveset for getting around the world, which means it's going to have a significant impact on how your character feels to control. And you can bake a lot of personality into the way a character runs, so it's also going to impact the player's understanding of who the character is. Run cycles are kind of a tone setter in that way, and this run cycle is a perfect tone setter. It is such an enthusiastic and excited run, which is exactly the right energy for this character in this game. Functionally, this run works great. As a player character, Astro Bot handles pretty well across the board, but I want to dig into the aesthetics on this one, because there's several things I really like about the way this run looks. For one, I like the choice to have Astro Bot leaned backward rather than forward. Normally, a lot of runs or sprints involve varying degrees of forward lean, leading more with the head or maybe the chest. But Astro Bot's run seems to lead with the hips, or I think you could even make an argument for it leading with the legs, as if his torso and his head are just being dragged along for the ride. This results in Astro Bot feeling a little top-heavy as a character, which makes sense given the giant head. Just look at the way this run starts, or how far he leans that head into his turns. Second thing I like about this run is how high those arms are raised. Humans tend to run with their elbows pulled much closer into their side, but having these arms raised so high as they swing back and forth, almost horizontal to the ground, is just real cute. Now, Astro Bot definitely did not invent this stylization choice. It's actually a fairly common look on characters with short, wide proportions like this. This is very similar to how Mario's arms look in a lot of his 3D games, but it does work very well here on Astro Bot, especially when combined with the third thing I like. I love how little vertical motion this run has. The body mechanics of most runs tend to involve some amount of vertical bounce with each step, and often when stylizing a character's run, animators will choose to exaggerate and amplify that vertical bounce, and that can often look very good. But if you watch Astro Bot's torso and head here, there's very little of that vertical bounce to be found. And that is probably for the best given how fast the rhythm of this run is. Astro Bot doesn't cover a lot of ground super quickly, but the rhythm of his run steps is very fast. And I could see adding a lot of vertical bounce to that rapid cadence, making things pretty noisy visually. Combine all of these three elements, the top heaviness, the raised arms, and the lack of vertical bounce, and you get a run cycle with this adorable toddling quality. Kind of a high-speed waddle. But also, on top of all of that, I really love the faithfulness to materials here. Astro Bot, the character, is supposed to look like he's made of hard plastic. He is basically an anthropomorphic console accessory, and the animators have made sure to keep him feeling that way. Almost all of the bending or rotational movement in this run happens at the joints and the hinges, while each of these hard plastic pieces of the body is kept almost completely rigid. Almost, but not entirely, because if you look close, you will spot some slight bending happening in a few places, like this very subtle twisting happening on the torso. That twist is an important element in the body mechanics of a walk or a run, but here, in order to preserve the impression of this character being made of hard plastic, they've kept that organic detail basically invisible unless you're actively looking for it. And if you look at where all of the rotation is happening in the joints and the hinges, you might also notice that the movement there is kept pretty tight. Like, there's no loose floppiness to Astro Bot's arms. His head doesn't have a lot of bobbing or bouncing overlap, which makes all of the movable joints on this bot feel pretty solid and sturdy. Like one of those posable figures that is just really good at holding whatever pose you put it in. In animation, we are not bound by the rules of real physics. We can make anything move pretty much however we want to. And there are plenty of times where bending the rules of realism can make a character's motion look way more appealing or exciting, but sometimes constraining your animation in order to preserve that sense of the recognizable materials the character is made of can help them to feel all the more tactile and grounded, make them feel more familiar. And finding that balance is important. Faithfulness to materials is what makes Toy Story characters feel like toys. It's why Lego characters animated like this feels more correct, somehow, than Lego characters animated like they're made of bendy rubber. There's nothing inherently wrong with animating a Lego character like this, but this feels more faithful to the materials these things are meant to be made of. I can't find anything bad to say about this one. It's just a very well-crafted, adorable little run. Next! Ooh, excellent choice. Okay. Now, this one's more of an animation system, and a reasonably complex one by early GameCube standards, so let's see if we can figure out how they put this together. If you hold the vacuum button, Luigi will grab the nozzle and transition to this vacuuming pose. This animation loop is basically the foundation that the rest is going to build upon. And I do really like the vibration on Luigi's head and torso while the vacuum is running. Nice little dash of exaggeration. If you move Luigi around while vacuuming, his upper body will maintain that vacuuming pose, while his lower body blends between various directional strafe cycles. Although there is a little bit of bobbing motion on Luigi's head as he walks, which is also a really nice touch. Helps to tie together what the top and bottom halves of his body are doing. Now, you can also aim the vacuum up or down or side to side, so there's an additional blend space of some sort, adapting Luigi's upper body animation to match your aiming directions. Spin Luigi far enough to either side, and his lower body gets in on it too, his feet shuffling to allow him to turn in place. In combination, all of these layered animations and poses exist for one purpose. They allow Luigi to freely move and aim in any direction while vacuuming. This is more or less how every player character in any third-person shooter is set up. It's very standard. But that's just the animation required to use the vacuum. Actually snagging a ghost is where things get more complex, because once Luigi's vacuum does latch onto a ghost, he effectively tethers to it and initiates a little tug-of-war minigame. So now Luigi's animation needs to reflect these two opposed forces competing for control. In order to visually convey how that contest is going at any given moment, Luigi seems to have, at least as best I can tell, 3 different animation states. Let's call them neutral, winning, and losing. By default, Luigi will play this neutral cycle, where he's trying to pull backwards, although if the player's not actively trying to move the opposite direction of the ghost, it's likely that Luigi will be getting pulled forward, his feet slipping and sliding beneath him. If the player doesn't put up enough of a fight, Luigi will eventually shift into his losing state, flopping forward onto his belly and trying to get his feet back under him as the ghost drags him around the room. If the player does succeed in pulling the opposite direction of the ghost, Luigi will instead transition into this winning state, where he's leaned way backward, again, like pulling a rope in tug-of-war. He might also have some additional yanking animations for transitioning into and out of this state. Honestly, it's kind of hard to tell in the chaos. But regardless of which state Luigi is currently in, his position and orientation in the world are primarily driven by the ghost's current location. Now that's a lot of moving parts, but taken all together as a system, these animations work quite well. These different states help to visually convey how your tug-of-war with the ghost is going, and the personality on display throughout adds a ton. Heck, this is the game that introduced this timid, scaredy-cat dimension to Luigi as a character in the first place. And I am actually kind of surprised at some of the little polish touches that are in here. Like the way Luigi's head trails just slightly behind the vacuum nozzle's movement when you aim. It contributes to the way that this incarnation of Luigi always feels just slightly gangly and uncoordinated, which only makes him feel more out of depth in this situation. And the dynamic bouncing on the vacuum hose is a nice touch as well, even if the physics of it do go a little bit wild during the tug-of-war. There is this one weird issue, though, where, for some reason that I can't pin down, Luigi's hat doesn't always sync up with his head. On specific animations, the thing will just clip right through his face for a few frames. Now, it does make sense that they would make the head and the hat be separate geometry. There's all kinds of reasons why the animator would want that. But why it ends up phasing into his head like this, I have no idea. It's not noticeable, fortunately, especially in all of the chaos of the ghost vacuuming, but still weird. This is all some very solid work, especially for 2001, but just for fun, let's have a peek at how this animation system looks a couple of sequels later. Development for the Luigi's Mansion sequels was handed off to the Vancouver-based studio Next Level Games, and I will never miss an opportunity to compliment the animators at Next Level Games, because look at how far they've taken this. Luigi's face is so much more expressive. That overlap that we saw on Luigi's head has been further exaggerated and applied more across his entire body. Look at the way his chest and his head drag behind as he strafes around. It softens him up even more than before, makes him look even less coordinated and in control of this situation. His strafing footwork looks way more natural, and these slams are just icing on the cake. The folks at Next Level took all of the strengths in that original vacuuming animation system, pushed them way further, and sanded away all of the rough edges. Stellar work, as always. Now let's do one more. What do we got? Another good choice, okay. Tactical Breach Wizards, if you are not familiar, is a turn-based tactical game, which obviously has very different animation needs than a platformer, or whatever genre Luigi's Mansion is. Because the player is giving their units commands rather than controlling them directly, these animations don't need to be instantly responsive in the same way as Astro Bot's Run or Luigi's vacuuming. Instead, these animations can just focus on clarity and looking cool. And looking cool is especially important for this animation in particular, because in this game, this is often the moment that kicks off the action. Most every level in the game will start like this. Your wizard operatives having a brief dialogue exchange outside of a room full of enemies, and then one of your wizards will magically breach the door, and your first turn will begin. Though it is worth noting that door breaching is not exclusively a cutscene moment. It's also just one of the basic actions in your tactical strategy toolkit. Sometimes you'll get to set up these initial door breaches yourself, or maybe breach another door further inside the level. But regardless of the context, the animation plays out more or less the same. Now, functionally speaking, all this animation really has to do from a gameplay perspective is clearly communicate what is literally happening. And it does that just fine. There was a door. Now there's a hole. Let the game begin. But on top of that basic gameplay function, what I really like about this animation is the way it so effectively communicates this game's premise and tone. A door breach is one of the first things you see happen in Tactical Breach Wizards, and I can't think of a more efficient way to instantly show the new player what they can expect from this game. And there is a punchiness to this blast that feels very satisfying. That half beat between the glyph being drawn and the blast going off, the screen shake, the unnaturally slow motion way the door shatters and falls apart, it just feels good to watch every time. Now, this is obviously an indie title made on an indie budget, and I think they've made some smart aesthetic decisions here in terms of managing animation scope. Like the choice to avoid detailed facial features, and simplifying the fingers down to just being blocky mitten shapes. These kinds of character design choices have allowed the animator to just focus on body language and posing, and I think that the pose work here is generally quite effective. That said, there are definitely still some rough edges in here. Given these characters' fairly realistic human proportions, I would love to see some more attention paid to naturalistic body mechanics, because there are a lot of moments in these animations where, just as an example, every part of the character's body will come to an unnatural stop on the same frame, or where their locomotion doesn't accurately reflect the character's center of gravity or their previous momentum. And especially in a tactics game where the animator isn't so tightly bound by the needs of responsive player control, there's no reason you couldn't give these animations even just an extra half second so the character's motion could resolve a little more naturally. And there are some technical implementation issues here as well, like the way the start of the door breach animation almost never lines up with the character's position in the pre-battle conversations. Just watch Zan here as he transitions into the door breach. The first frame has him popping into a completely different starting pose, and then a shift backward half a step to the actual starting position of the door breach animation. And then there's his hand clipping through the door, and then the way that his feet slide into a new position as he goes to stand up. Just a bunch of tiny little polish issues that accumulate. Again, it's an indie game made on indie resources, and I don't want to be too mean or unfair, especially because I think that these animations are still very successful overall despite these issues. But in a scenario where more time or animation budget were available, I can definitely see the places where I'd want to push for some improvement. That said, it is worth noting that all of your playable characters have their own breaching animation, and that is a significant factor to consider. These characters' personalities are a huge part of this game's appeal, and I love seeing animation being used to emphasize their unique qualities. Like, if I had to choose between A, having a single, shared breaching animation for all of the characters that was twice as polished, Or B, accepting a few rough edges so that every character could have their own breaching animation? This is the option I'd pick too. Not that personality and polish are mutually exclusive qualities, because they're not, but if they were, I'd choose personality every time. A big thank you to my patrons for all of their animation analysis suggestions, especially Stefan, Sparky DJM1, and Bisected Brioche for suggesting these 3 in particular. If you would like to get in on the animation suggestions for future videos of this sort, as always, I've got a Patreon link down in the description below. But I have a very long overdue Final Fantasy video I need to get back to, so I'll see you later. Until then, goodbye!